I found my wife's wedding dress beside a dumpster on a Tuesday morning. For a few seconds, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The white fabric was inside a black trash bag, but the top had fallen open. I could see the lace sleeve, the pearl buttons, the small tear near the hem that Susan had repaired herself 42 years earlier. I stood in my driveway holding a grocery bag in one hand. Then I dropped it. Oranges rolled across the pavement. I didn't notice. I walked toward the dumpster. Under the wedding dress was Susan's blue scarf. Then the wooden jewelry box her mother had given her. Then a stack of photographs. And beside them a small cardboard box with my wife's handwriting across the top. Things for Thomas. My hands started shaking. I looked toward the house. The front door was open. My daughter-in-law, Karen, was inside. Karen. She appeared from the kitchen. She didn't look surprised. "Oh, you're back. Why are Susan's things outside?" She looked at the trash bag. "Those. Yes, those." She shrugged. "They're old." I stared at her. "That doesn't answer my question. We're cleaning. That's my wife's wedding dress." "I know, and you worn it in years." My wife had been dead for 6 years. I felt something tighten in my chest. "You knew what these things meant to me." Karen sighed. "Thomas, you need to let go. Let go. You have an entire room full of stuff from the past. That room belonged to Susan." "Exactly." She folded her arms. "You can't live in the past forever." I looked at the photographs scattered near the dumpster. There was one of Susan holding our son Daniel when he was 3. Another showed us on our honeymoon. Another showed our daughter-in-law at the hospital after giving birth to our first grandchild. "You threw out our family photographs. We have digital copies." I stared at her. "You don't understand," she sighed. "No, you don't." I looked at her. "What does that mean? You're 72, Thomas. You need to start thinking differently." I almost laughed. About what? About what's important now." I looked at the dumpster, then at her. "What exactly is important now? Our children, our grandchildren, your future." I nodded slowly. "And what isn't important?" She didn't answer. I looked at the wedding dress. My wife's things, nothing. The life we built," she finally said. "You're making this emotional." I picked up the dress. "No." I shook my head. "You made it emotional when you threw away the only physical things I have left from my wife." I turned toward the door. Daniel came in just as I was walking out. He looked at the dress in my arms, then at Karen. "What happened?" I looked at my son. "Ask your wife." He stared at the dumpster. His face changed. That I didn't wait. I carried Susan's belongings to my truck. That afternoon I called my lawyer. "Andrew, yes, I need to change my will." He went quiet. "Did something happen?" I looked at the wedding dress folded across my lap. "Yes." "What?" "My daughter-in-law threw away my wife's belongings." Another pause, then I said, "And I think my family has forgotten something very important." "What?" "They think my estate is already theirs." Andrew exhaled. "That is a conversation we should have." I looked at Susan's wedding dress. "I don't want a conversation." I stared at the house where my son and his wife had assumed they belonged. "I want them to discover that I am still alive." My wife's name was Susan. We met at a college football game. She was sitting behind me. I turned around because someone had thrown popcorn at my head. She laughed. "You look offended." "I am." That was funny. "Apparently." She laughed again. I asked her out the following week. 6 months later, we were engaged. We weren't rich. I worked as an electrical contractor. Susan worked for a local insurance company. We bought our first house with a small down payment and spent years fixing it. The kitchen had terrible cabinets. The bathroom floor was uneven. The basement flooded every spring. Susan loved it anyway. She made the house warm. There were photographs everywhere, flowers in the kitchen, music on Saturday mornings. She kept handwritten recipes in a blue tin. She had a habit of buying little things because they reminded her of someone. A ceramic bird, a wooden box, a scarf from a trip, a silver brooch from her mother. None of those things were expensive, but they made our home feel like ours. We had one child, Daniel. Susan adored him. When he was little, she saved everything. His first drawing, his hospital bracelet, his first tooth, his school photographs. I used to tease her. "You're going to fill the entire house." She would smile. "You'll thank me someday." I did. After Susan died, those boxes became more than clutter. They became evidence that she had existed. Her handwriting, her perfume on an old scarf, the indentation in her favorite chair, the tiny crack in a Christmas ornament. People who haven't lost someone often don't understand. A photograph isn't just a photograph. Sometimes it's the last place a person still looks alive, and Karen knew that. She knew exactly what those things meant. That's why seeing them beside the dumpster hurt. But there was something else. For the past year, Karen had been asking questions. What happens to the house? What happens to your investments? Did Susan leave anything? How much is in your retirement accounts? At first, I thought she was simply being practical. Then Daniel started asking, "What does your will say?" I laughed. "Why? Just wondering, you're not getting old." He smiled awkwardly. But the question continued, and slowly, I realized my family wasn't thinking about my life. They were thinking about what came after it. Karen first suggested that I sell the house 7 months after Susan died. "You don't need all this space." I told her I liked my house. "You could move somewhere smaller. I don't want to. You'd save money. I have enough money. What if your health changes?" "I'll deal with it," she smiled. "You don't have to be stubborn." I laughed. "This is my home." She didn't argue. Not then. Months later, she brought it up again, then again. Eventually, Daniel joined the conversation. "Dad, we're just worried about you." "I'm fine. You live alone." "Yes, you should be closer to us." "I live 20 minutes away." Still, I looked at him. "What are you really asking?" He didn't answer. Karen did. "We're trying to plan for the future." I knew that phrase, the future. Every time they used it, it meant my house. After Susan died, I had updated my will. Everything was simple. The house, my investments, my savings, my personal possessions. They would go to Daniel. I had no problem with that. He was my son. I had planned to give him most of what I owned eventually. But the will was written when I believed my family saw my belongings as part of my life. Now I wasn't sure. And the morning I found Susan's wedding dress in the trash, I became certain. Something had changed. Susan had a small room upstairs. She used it for sewing. Her machine was still there. Shelves of fabric, boxes of buttons, photographs. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to change it. I rarely entered, but I couldn't empty it either. Karen hated that room. "You should really clean this out." "Why? Nobody uses it." "I do. When I need to remember Susan." She shook her head. "That isn't healthy." I stared at her. "You don't get to decide that," she apologized, but the comments continued. Then one day, Daniel asked, "Dad, would you ever let us move in?" I laughed. "You already live in your own house. We're running out of space. You have 4 bedrooms. We want the children to have a playroom." I looked at him. "You want my wife's sewing room?" He didn't answer. That told me everything. They didn't want to be closer to me. They wanted more space. My house was becoming a solution to every problem they had. Not my home. A solution. When I found Susan's things in the trash, I finally understood. Karen wasn't just trying to change the house. She was trying to erase the person who made it meaningful to me, and I was finished pretending I didn't notice. Andrew reviewed my existing will. "You can change everything." "I know. What do you want?" I thought about it. "I don't want Daniel punished." "Good. I don't want my grandchildren punished." "Good. But I don't want Karen controlling what happens to my estate." Andrew nodded. "That's straightforward." I looked at him. "I want conditions." "What kind?" I explained. "The house could not be sold immediately. My wife's personal belongings would be protected. Certain assets would be placed into trusts. My grandchildren would receive educational funds. Daniel could inherit, but only after meeting certain conditions related to debt and financial responsibility." Andrew listened. Then he asked, "Are you doing this because of the wedding dress?" "No." "Then why?" I looked at him. "Because the wedding dress showed me something." "What?" "I've spent years thinking my family was waiting to inherit my things." He watched me carefully. "I realize they're actually waiting for me to disappear." Andrew leaned back. "That changes everything." I nodded. "There is one more thing." "What?" "I've been invited onto a television program." He frowned. "About what?" "Local community business and senior affairs. And they want me to talk about a non-profit I've supported for years." Andrew smiled. "That sounds harmless." "It is." I paused. "Until I announce my new estate plan." He looked at me. "Are you sure?" "Yes. You want to change your will on live television?" I smiled. "No, I want to reveal that I already changed it." The program was called Carolina Today. It wasn't nationally famous, but it had a large regional audience. The host, Melissa Grant, had interviewed me once before about small business retirement planning. This time, she wanted to discuss a community foundation I had supported, a children's housing program, senior services, food assistance. I agreed. I told Daniel, "I'm doing a television interview next week." He smiled. "That's great, Dad." Karen looked at me. "What about charity?" She smiled. "Good." She didn't ask more. That surprised me. Then Daniel asked, "Are you going to talk about your estate?" I looked at him. "No." He relaxed. I said nothing else. The day before the interview, Andrew called. "Everything is ready. The documents? Signed. Trusts established. Beneficiaries updated. And the old will Revoked. I looked out the window. You know what's strange? What? I don't feel angry anymore. Good, I feel clear. That is better. I smiled. I think clarity is more powerful than anger. He laughed. That is why you're paying me. The studio lights were brighter than I expected. Melissa sat across from me. We talked about the charity, about retirement, about aging with dignity, about the importance of community. Then she asked, "You've been very generous to several organizations over the years. Why?" I smiled. My wife taught me something. What? That money is only useful if it becomes something good. She smiled. Your wife sounds wonderful. She was. I looked down for a moment. She still is. Melissa asked about Susan. I told stories, her cooking, her sewing, her habit of keeping every little memory. The audience laughed. Then Melissa said, "You recently made some changes to your estate planning." I looked directly into the camera. Yes. Can you tell us about them? I could feel my heart beating. Yes, I took a breath. Last week, my daughter-in-law threw my late wife's keepsakes in the trash. The studio became completely silent. Melissa's expression changed. What? I nodded. She threw out Susan's wedding dress. Personal belongings. Why? She said they were old. Melissa looked at me. And what did you do? I changed my will. She paused. How? I looked at the camera. I rewrote it completely. Then I smiled. Not to punish my family. Melissa leaned forward. Then why? To protect my wife's memory. I explained that my estate would be reorganized. The house would remain protected for a period after my death. Susan's personal belongings would be transferred into a family archive. My grandchildren would have educational trusts. A large portion of my estate would fund the local charity. Daniel would still receive an inheritance, but not in the way he expected. Certain assets would only be distributed if he maintained financial independence. And Karen would not control any inherited assets, the studio for the grandchildren. Melissa asked, "Were you trying to send a message to your family?" I nodded. Yes. What message? I looked directly into the camera. That being family does not give you ownership over another person's life. I paused. And it certainly doesn't give you permission to destroy the memories of someone they loved. Melissa was quiet. Then she asked, "Do you think your daughter-in-law will be upset?" Yes. Are you worried? No. Why not? Because for the first time, I made a decision while I was still alive. The audience applauded. I didn't expect that. Then Melissa asked, "What would you say to your son?" I looked into the camera. "I love you." I paused. But love isn't permission. The audience became completely silent. Then I added, "If you inherit something from me someday, I want you to remember that it came from a man who chose to give it, not from someone you were entitled to take from." The moment the interview ended, my phone exploded. Daniel, Karen, family members, friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't answer immediately. Then Daniel sent a message. "Dad, what did you just do?" I replied, "I told the truth." He called. I answered, "Dad, yes." "You changed your will on television." "No." "What?" I announced the will I had already changed. He went quiet. "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have listened?" He had no answer. Karen got on the phone. "This is humiliating." I said nothing. "You made us look terrible." "No, you discussed our private family problems publicly. I discussed what happened to my wife's possessions. You didn't have to mention me. I didn't mention your name. Everyone knows." I looked out the window. "You're worried about what people think?" "Yes." I shook my head. "You threw away my wife's wedding dress." I made a mistake. "No," I corrected her. "You made a choice." Silence. Then she said, "You're punishing us." "No," I spoke calmly. "I'm making sure the things I care about are protected." She hung up. I placed the phone on the table. For the first time in months, the house was quiet, and I felt no guilt. The next evening, Daniel came to my house. He didn't bring Karen. He stood at the door. "Can I come in?" Yes. He looked around at the photographs, at the old furniture, at the room where Susan's things had been. "Where is Mom's wedding dress?" He nodded. "Good." We sat down. "I didn't know she threw it away." "You knew she wanted the room cleared?" "Yes." "Why didn't you stop her?" He looked down. "I thought it was clutter." I stared at him. "It was her life." "I know." "No." I shook my head. "I don't think you do." He swallowed. "You changed the will because of us." "I changed the will because I realized something about myself." "What?" "I was giving too much away while I was still alive." He looked at me. "Dad, I spent years helping you. I know. I helped you buy your first home. I know. I helped when the business failed. I know. I paid for the children's school expenses." His eyes filled with tears. "I know, and I never regretted any of it." He looked at me. "So what's different?" I answered, "I realized you stopped seeing help as a gift." He lowered his head. "You started seeing it as something that would always be there." He nodded. "I did. That honesty mattered." I continued, "I'm not taking your inheritance away." He looked up. No, no. Then why change it? 'Cause now I know you need boundaries. He nodded. I understand. Karen had believed she would eventually control everything. The house, the investments, the grandchildren's inheritance. She had assumed Daniel would inherit most of my estate, and she had assumed she would help manage it. The new will changed all of that. She wasn't disinherited. She simply no longer controlled assets that belonged to other people. The grandchildren's trusts were professionally managed. The charitable foundation received a substantial portion. Daniel received property and investments under conditions that encouraged responsible management. My personal belongings went into an archival collection, and Susan's things were protected. The wedding dress, the jewelry box, the photographs, her recipes, her letters. Everything. Karen couldn't throw any of it away. Nobody could. That was the point. A month later, I finished restoring Susan's sewing room. I cleaned it, repaired the shelves, framed some photographs, placed her sewing machine near the window. I put the wedding dress in a preservation box. Then I sat in the room for the first time since she died. It was peaceful, not sad, peaceful. Daniel came in behind me. He looked around. This is beautiful. Yes, I remember Mom sitting there. She spent hours there. He smiled. She made my Halloween costume in this room. I remember. He pointed to the shelf. Is that my old school project? Yes. He laughed. Why did you keep that? Your mother did. He became quiet. Then he said, I'm glad you didn't let them throw it away. I looked at him. I know. He sat down. I think I finally understand. What? Mom's things were never junk. No. He looked around. They were proof that we existed together. I nodded. That is exactly what they were. My grandchildren eventually heard about the television interview. My grandson asked me, Grandpa, are you rich? I laughed. Why? Mom said you changed your will. I looked at Daniel. He smiled awkwardly. I sat beside my grandson. Money is complicated. Do I get any? I laughed. Maybe. He grinned. What about me? My granddaughter asked. You both have savings accounts because you're going to die? I nearly choked. Daniel covered his face. I smiled. Hopefully not for a very long time. She nodded. Then she asked, Can we have Grandma's things? I looked at them. Yes. But later. Can we see them now? I smiled. Of course, I took them upstairs. I showed them the photographs, the wedding dress, the jewelry box, the recipes. My granddaughter touched the lace carefully. She was beautiful. She was. Did Grandma wear this? Yes. Can we keep it? I shook my head. It's not about keeping it. What is it about? I answered, remembering. Several months later, Karen came to my house. She looked uncomfortable. She stood on the porch holding a cardboard box. What's that? She handed it to me. Inside were photographs, Susan's photographs, some I had never seen. Where did you find these? In a storage closet. I looked at her. She swallowed. I shouldn't have thrown anything away. No, she nodded. I was frustrated, I know. I wanted the house to feel like ours. I looked at her. You could have asked. I know. She looked down. I thought because you were getting older, things had to change. They do. She looked surprised. But change doesn't mean erasing the past. She nodded. I'm sorry. I believed her, not completely, but enough. Thank you. She wiped her eyes. Will you ever forgive me? I already have. She looked up. But I still changed the will. A small smile appeared. I know. And I won't change it back. Because you apologized. I know. That was the answer I needed. She finally understood. Forgiveness was not the same thing as surrender. Some people asked why I announced the will publicly. Why not simply change it privately? The answer was simple. Because my family had been living under assumptions. They believed my house was already part of their future. They believed my belongings would eventually become theirs. They believed my money was something they could plan around. I wanted to make one thing clear. I was alive, I was capable, and I was still allowed to make decisions about my own life. The television interview was not revenge. It was visibility. For years I had remained quiet because I didn't want family conflict. Silence had not created peace. It had created assumptions, so I chose truth publicly, calmly, without shouting, without insulting anyone. I simply told people what I had decided, and once the assumptions were gone, my family had to confront reality. After everything settled, I found one more thing. A letter Susan had written years before she died. It had been inside the blue box. I had never opened it because I didn't know it existed. The envelope had my name on it. I sat in the sewing room and read it. It said, Thomas, if you're reading this, then I am probably not sitting beside you anymore. I stopped, then continued. She wrote about Daniel, about our grandchildren, about the house, about memories. Then one sentence caught my attention. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for keeping pieces of our life. I put the letter down. I cried. Not because I missed her. I did. But because after all these years, Susan had somehow answered the question I had been struggling with. She continued. Objects are not the same as memories, but sometimes objects help memories survive. I read it again. Then I smiled. She had understood. Of course she had. She always had. I used to think my legacy was simple: my house, my savings, my investments. Whatever remained would eventually go to Daniel. That was what I had believed. Now I see legacy differently. My legacy is what survives me with meaning. The charity I support, the grandchildren I teach, the stories about Susan, the photographs, the recipes, the lessons, the boundaries, the truth. Money matters. Of course it does. But money disappears quickly when people inherit it without understanding its value. Memories are different. They can survive generations. That is why Susan's sewing room remains. That is why her wedding dress is preserved. That is why the grandchildren know her name. Not because I want them to live in the past, because knowing where you came from helps you understand who you are. A year after the television interview, Daniel came over. We sat on the porch. He looked at me. "Dad?" "Yes. I want to tell you something." "Go ahead." "I think changing the will was the best thing you could have done." I laughed. "That surprises me." "It surprised me too." He smiled. "I used to think inheritance was about what you leave behind, and now it's about what you teach before you leave." I nodded. He continued. "You taught me that family doesn't mean entitlement." I smiled. "That's a good lesson." "And Mom's room?" "Yes. I want my children to see it." "They do." "Good." He looked toward the house. "I want them to know who she was." I smiled. "Then you're finally understanding." He leaned back. "I'm sorry I let Karen throw those things away. I know. I should have stopped it. Yes, I can't change it, no, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again." I looked at my son. "That is enough. Susan's wedding dress is no longer in a trash bag. It hangs in a preservation box in the room upstairs. Her scarf is folded neatly beside it. The jewelry box is on the shelf. The photographs are framed. The recipes are in an album. Everything has a place. Not because I can't let go, because I finally understand what should be kept. There is a difference between living in the past and honoring it. I can do both. I can remember Susan and still build a future. I can love my son and still set boundaries. I can forgive Karen and still protect my decisions. I can leave my family an inheritance without allowing them to treat my life like an estate waiting to be divided. That was the real lesson. My daughter-in-law threw out my late wife's keepsakes. She thought they were old. She thought they were clutter. She thought my family had already moved on. She was wrong. Those things weren't valuable because they were expensive. They were valuable because they couldn't be replaced. And that was exactly why I rewrote my will. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, because I finally understood that my legacy should reflect what I valued while I was alive: family mirror, responsibility, generosity, and choice. I chose where my money would go. I chose who would manage it. I chose how Susan's memories would be protected. And I chose not to let anyone rush me out of my own life, simply because they were waiting for what came after it. When people asked me later why I had done it on television, I gave them a simple answer. I wanted my family to hear my decision from me. Not through rumors, not through lawyers, not after I was gone, while I was alive, because that is something people often forget about older parents. We are still here, still thinking, still deciding, still loving, still making choices. We are not unfinished estates, we are people. And as long as I am alive, my story is not over. Neither is my wife's. Her things are still here: her handwriting, her faux dress, her recipes. And sometimes, when the afternoon light falls across her sewing room, I sit there quietly and think about the woman who built this life with me. I imagine what she would say. I already know. She would probably look at the restored room and smile. Then she would ask, "Did you finally stop letting everyone else decide what matters?" And for the first time I could answer confidently, "Yes, Susan. I finally did." My daughter-in-law threw out my late wife's keepsakes, so I rewrote my will on live television. But the real decision wasn't about money. It was about ownership. Not ownership of a house, not ownership of a bank account, ownership of my own life. And that was something no one could inherit from me. If this story made you think about family boundaries, inheritance, grief, and the importance of preserving memories, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the story, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional family stories about betrayal, consequences, unexpected justice, and second chances.